Good afternoon, everybody. Really great to have you on this webinar today. I am just going to give it a minute or so. I can see people joining. Fantastic to have you, but I want to make sure everyone's got a chance to join in. So I am just going to give it a couple of minutes and then we'll get going. But fantastic to see some familiar names there in the chat, and we'll get going shortly. For those of you guys just joining, I am just going to give it a minute or so just to make sure everyone gets a chance to join. So just bear with me. And for those who joined from the start, sorry, you're going to hear me repeat myself for the next minute or so, just to make sure everyone's aware that we are good to go. But we just need to make sure everyone who wanted to join has got a chance to jump in. Fantastic. Okay, so I think we should be good to go now. As I say, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We are going to be talking about MTD today, but just before we get onto that, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping just so everybody can see a little bit of how they can interact with us as we go through this. So as you can see, you should be able to see a few options within here. So the first one is you'll be automatically muted just to make sure the experience is uniform for everybody. You won't be coming off your mics. It's just a chat interaction, so don't worry too much about that. And you should see a questions button there, as you can see on screen, where you can ping us your questions. So please do go through and ask as many questions as you can. Whatever you're thinking, just ping that in the chat there, in the questions box, sorry, to make sure that we get those through. As we go through, don't worry if it's not answered straight away. These questions are something that we may just build up to answer at the end. What we will do is, as we're going through, if it feels right, we may try and answer it there and then to work it into what we're talking about. But don't worry if we don't. We will make sure that we get to all those questions that you guys have got. So I encourage you to interact with this. What we want you guys to take away from this is an action, something you can think about, something you can change practically in your business or the way you work, and asking questions will help you get there. So please be as forthright as you can be on those. Fantastic. So as you can see, we're here to talk about MTD and getting ready for the final whistle, as we're talking about there. And that pun, as the name suggests, is also brought to you by another announcement that we want to talk about here at Sage. So Paige, you can just jump on to the next slide for us. Fantastic. So we have announced our support of the EFL. So our partnership with the EFL comes at the perfect time for this. So we've built a couple of football puns into the name of this webinar to hint towards this, but we think this partnership is really, really important because we want to commit to the businesses at the center of your community. We think the EFL, the football clubs in there, represent a real heart of the communities they sit within there. And we think that you guys, the practices that sit within those communities as well, are at the center of those communities, supporting those businesses as well. So we want to make sure that we're showing you our commitment to support those businesses. And you may have seen our brand ambassador, Gary Neville, talking about this, talking about how the match day interacts with the businesses in the area and how important that is. And that just represents what we want to be to the UK economy and to the UK accountant and bookkeeper space as well. And this is even more pertinent to this because one of the most relevant challenges facing small businesses out there is going to be MTD. That's a very relevant space to be within at the minute. And we want to help you guys be the leaders in this change within your communities, within the businesses you work with, so you can make sure everyone who needs that support can get the best possible support within there. So on that note, what I want to do now is I want to hand over to Paige Driver, who's joining me here. Paige, you want to introduce yourself and then take these guys through the introduction to the MTD action plan that you're going to be talking through today. Can't hear you, Paige, if you are speaking. Sorry, guys, bear with us. We will get there, guys. Just give us 1 minute. Apologies, guys. Just having a couple of technical issues. We will get going shortly. This is just one minor hiccup. The rest will be smooth sailing, I promise. Just need to make sure Paige can actually speak to you guys and interact with you. It does look like you're self-muted, Paige, on the panel that I can see here. I don't know if you're able to remove yourself from that. Okay, while we're doing this, while we're just waiting to get this sorted, there is a question that I want to ask you guys. So we'll take a minute here, we'll get sorted, but you should be seeing a poll on your screen now just to help us understand how we can best support you guys. So we want to understand if you've currently got a client on the MTD public beta, and while we're sorting the technical issues in the background, if you guys can just let us know how many of you guys have got a client on the public beta currently, because I think this is going to be a really important step for getting ready for this. And this is going to be a key part of where we can help and where we can support in this as well. So just let us know if you're on the beta and we'll sort these issues out in the background. Okay, let's give it another 30 seconds or so to give everyone a chance to vote in that poll. Okay, so it does look like predominantly, massively, sort of majority of you guys are on the no there at the minute. So if there's any particular reason why that is, please post it in the chat, or if you've got any questions around the beta, please again post that in the chat and we'll do what we can to support and answer that for you. Now, what I am going to do within here, I'm just going to see, because I'm not sure whether Paige has sorted her issues out there or not. I'm just going to close that poll and then I'll see if we can address this. Fantastic. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just see if I can kick us off in this process shortly. Brilliant. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll get us going, and then once we've got Paige back, we can move forward with that as well. So hopefully you guys can see my screen now. Just double check the screen that I'm sharing. Brilliant. So what we want to do within here is we just want to make sure that we're supporting you in delivering your MTD action plan within here as well. So today is really about what is it you need to do to get ready for this and just make sure that we're delivering as best as we possible around that. I can see lots of people are jumping into the chat and interacting. That's brilliant, fantastic. Thank you for that. So please keep that up. And as I say, we will answer those as we move forward. Now, just in terms of what we should be aware of is just having a look at where we are with MTD currently and how that's going to work. So if we just take a look at this slide here, you can see we've got a little bit of a timeline of what this is going to look like and where people are affected. So I'm sure you guys are really confident with this, but just to make sure everyone's really happy with how this is going to work, we've got sole traders and landlords with that qualifying gross income over 50,000 being impacted by April 2026. And so these are the people that are the most important ones for us to be ready for. So when we're talking through this today, we will be speaking about how we can get ready for that, but it's also worth noting that this is a sliding scale where from the 6th of April 2027 over 30k, and then from 2028 it'll be over 20k. So I think there's been some recent numbers released by HMRC that estimates across this it's just going to be shy of 3 million people impacted by this, and I think around 1 million of those are not with an agent currently. So there's obviously some challenges for change with the current clients that you're working with, but also for those that can really get this right and really deliver a great service, there is opportunity out there for people that aren't currently represented, that may be looking for some great representation out there to understand where we can support within that. So this is all about building up and getting ready for that initial date, but please just to be aware that there's an ongoing requirement moving forward from this. So when we think about sole traders in here, we've got these three groups that we should be thinking about across this VAT and MTD deadline. We've got the sole traders, balance sheet reporting, we've got the sole traders with the income and expenditure, and then also we need to make sure that we're considering those landlords within there as well. So we want to make sure that we're considering those three groups within that process, and building up towards this deadline is going to be really important for us. Now, I am just going to just take a pause to see if Paige, if you're back with us, have you been able to get your microphone working? No, okay. Okay, I will continue. As soon as we get Paige back, we'll let her jump back in. So if we look at this, obviously this is across the timeline that's in the past, but if we look at where we're looking at here, we've got around the 150-day mark until that deadline within there. So from 26 to 27, we're going to have those quarterly submissions, and this is 150 or so days that we need to make sure that we're able to deliver this content. So we're going to help you get ready for this point here and just make sure that you fully understand how it is that you're going to be able to deliver for these clients. So just bearing in mind, I imagine this is why you're here, the timelines are coming and the deadlines are approaching fast, but there's still time in here to address this and make sure that we can educate our clients as well within there. So we've seen the letters drop, and that's happened around the April-May time within here. So we've had that understanding from HMRC and people have been talking about that, but also we've got this requirement to get these tax returns for 24-25 sorted ahead of that January-February approach there, and then be ready to deliver this approach in the coming months. So we need to make sure that we're there as well. So if we have a little look at this, at who's in and who's out within here. So we've got a great list of people that we can address within here. And if we take a look at the left-hand side here, you can see with the SA numbers exactly who is going to be in and who's affected across this. So I think there's been a few questions coming in the chat here, but these are the people that will be in for you to consider when you're thinking about the segmentation of your clients. This is going to be really important for us in this approach. Now, if we think about who's out, obviously partnerships, trusts, estates, taxpayers with the power of attorney, we've got like non-UK residents of foreign entertainers and sports people. So this is a really good little segment there to understand exactly who is affected and who isn't affected in this. So this is something that I'd consider to maybe take a screenshot of, we can share it afterwards, but just to think about when you're segmenting your clients, how you're going to get ready for this. Okay, fantastic. Now, when we're planning for these submissions, we want to be thinking about this approach for a standard update around here. So 6th of April to the 5th of July, we've got that update 1 as standard. Then we've got update 2, so 6th of April to the 5th of October. We've got the 3rd update within there, where we're going to go from the 6th of April to the 5th of January. And then you've got that 4th update that runs from the 6th to the 5th across there. So this is a nice little breakdown of exactly how that's going to look moving forward. Now, the calendar here is a helpful breakdown of how you should approach this, to think about with the submission deadline and what that's going to look like, when you should be building this on towards. So obviously there's a standard there, but then the calendar here is telling you what those dates need to be moving forward. And then you've got that final tax return submission within there as well. And I'm just going to stop. I think there's an issue with the straight sharing there. So let me just see if I can address that as well. Just going to stop my share there and see if I can sort this out for you guys. 1 minute. Okay, can you guys now see that planning for submission slide again? Hopefully that's now been addressed, but this should now be changing for you guys as we move forward. Can you see that within there? Someone just wants to let me know whether that's something in there that you guys can see. Brilliant, thank you very much. Okay, so let me just get back to where we were within there. So just in terms of what you should be seeing now, it should be a planning for submissions, and there should be standard and calendar with timelines running across 26 to 28. So I can see, Teresa, you're saying there's a blank screen within there. So can you now see that okay? Brilliant, okay, fantastic. So what we want to think about here, just in terms of penalty points and the approach in this as well. Now, if we can just think about the approach that we're going to take with this, there's going to be a point system. There's a threshold before the financial penalty within there. There's points for VAT and income tax that are not linked. Resetting points with compliance is going to be a key part of this. And there's no confirmed soft landing for this either. So I know that's been something that people have been speaking about, but there's no confirmed soft landing within there. Now, in terms of the approach that we want to take and how we want to think about this. Okay, sorry, I think we may have Paige back now. Paige, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we've got you back now there, Paige.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm back.
Fantastic. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll let you go through this slide here. On the penalty point slide here, Paige, and a few questions coming in, I'll hand over to yourself. If you want to give yourself a little introduction, and then if you want to start this slide from scratch to make sure it's done the justice, then I'll come with you when it's planned.
If you can do the driver for me. So yeah, obviously I'll do a little introduction to myself then. So Paige Driver, absolute queen when it comes to technology, as you can tell. But no, so my role is actually digital transformation. So what I do is I work with the accountants and the bookkeepers over here at Sage to really support them through that change. Prior to working at Sage, though, I was actually an accountant myself. So I studied in practice, and that just means that I've got a lot of that real hands-on experience with what it feels like to be dealing with clients and have all that pressure of deadlines, as well as then trying to navigate through quite a lot of this regulation change that's coming along. So That's why sessions like this today are really important to me, because it means that we've got an opportunity here to really support you guys with things that obviously changing in terms of technology, but also from a regulation perspective. So thank you so much, Jack, for covering off the first few slides. I had to completely restart the computer with that one, so I have missed a few bits there, but if there's any questions at the end, obviously I'd be happy to cover off what's gone on there. But yeah, sorry. So Jack, I don't know if you managed to work your way through all of this, but do you want me to just start from scratch with this one?
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if you want to take over the sharing of the slides as well, if that'd be useful. Do you want me to
Can I?
jump
Would you mind just clicking through them, just like try and reboot that bit at the moment? That's all, if that's okay. But
Yeah,
there's not many builder slides with that. Thank you. So yeah, so when it comes to the penalty points, this is all a real key part that's also changing. So I know we've built up everything here on the slide so far, but basically when it comes to these penalty points, every late submission earns a point, and then 4 points equals a £200 fine. So then any penalty points that are received for VAT aren't then linked to any penalty points that are received from income tax, and then vice versa. And then obviously this, as we go through here, we can see that good compliance resets the points after a period. And at the moment, there isn't any confirmed soft landing with this. So my view on it really is that penalties will apply from day one. I think otherwise the clients could ignore those quarterly updates for years. So it's a real key message that we start delivering that to our clients as soon as possible, so that we can prepare them for those, or get them into really good habits really of stricter disciplines around those deadlines. So that's why I want to cover off those penalties. Jacob, just on the next slide for me. We then move into, if you want to build it up, there's a few clicks for me, it's about 4 or so. This is where we can talk about that it's not just the submissions, it is payments too. So in the old self-assessment model, that gave you 30 days before the penalties hit, whereas when it comes to MTD, you have only got 15 days. So after that 15-day period, a 3% penalty is then applied. And then after 30 days, there's another 3% penalty that goes onto the account. Now, after a year has passed, then that raises to 10%. So the aim here is to nudge clients into actually just paying on time, not leaving it until the last minute. So I'm really hoping that that is music to most people's ears. But if they can't pay, then there may be the option to put a time to pay agreement in place to stop those penalties from being charged. But again, as we went through the points just now, part of our job is really educating our clients. So if we can make them aware of these tighter rules in advance, then we're going to be getting them into good habits. That's it. And then Jack, just onto the next slide for me. I'll just swivel around my screens here, bear with me. Fab. Okay, so now that we have all the facts with regards to what the deadlines look like for MTD, what we actually want to now talk about is how we put all of this into plan. So thankfully, we've mapped that all out ready for you. Step 1, we've listed down here, is going to be segmentation. Now, it is an admin task, so I'm not going to try and paint a rosy picture with this one. But without that segmentation, we're really going to be scrambling last minute. And the key part around segmentation is that the answers here really tell you how much hand-holding your clients are going to need, and then it also helps you to prioritize when we start working with those clients. Now, this is going to be entirely bespoke to you and your team and the way that you wish to work. But for instance, you may want to start working with those clients who do need more of a hand-holding approach so that you can manage that workload and stress over a period of time. However, you might want to take the approach that actually building your own team's confidence is more of a priority, and actually start then with the clients that are more forgiving and perhaps more tech savvy. And then that's when you have an opportunity to test the process and the systems before then working with your more resistant clients. So just on to the next slide for me, Janet. So once we have segmented, then step 2 is to actually start setting clients up in your agent services account. So this ultimately is the gateway to MTD. Without it, you can't actually act on behalf of your clients. So The good news here is that if you have already filed for VAT under MTD, then you will have an agent services account. But in this scenario, you are going to need to go client by client, validating their details and confirm their eligibility. We've worked it out that's going to be roughly 4 to 5 minutes per client. But when you then multiply that across your portfolio, that's potentially hours worth of work. So naturally, my advice at this point is going to be to start early, and ideally to do this alongside your next tax return when you already have all of those details to hand, rather than finding out that you've got loads of outdated addresses in April of next year. Then step 3, and there's just another slide that put another little bit that pops up after that, I believe. So this is about looking at setting you up with the right digital record keeping software. Now, at Sage, we're really keen to support you with making the right choice here. And we have got tools to support with every type of client that is going to be impacted by MTD. So just like you can't treat every client the same way with regards of pricing and workflows and communication, we also understand that we can't expect every client to be using the same tool. So from the simplest clients that perhaps don't see any value whatsoever in changing their behaviours right now, right up to your more complex clients that perhaps need a bit more of a beefier solution, then we've got the tools covered for you across various levels of tiers within Sage. And then lots of questions that we get asked around choosing the right software is actually how do they deal with submitting 2 streams of income. So if, for example, we have, say like Pete the Plumber, it's one that we used before, and they also have an income rental, that's going to be 2 separate updates, which does then mean two separate pieces of software. So you could end up having one client with multiple submissions per quarter, and then at year end you bring in your allowances, your adjustments and any other income sources before submitting the full MTD tax return. So at this point, it's going to be really important to be inquisitive with your providers, ask them what they're doing with MTD and how they're handling that new tax return, and then also ask them how AI fits into all of that plan as well. So this is an opportunity to review your entire tech stack. That's everything from your data capturing tools, how are we actually collecting that information from our clients, right through to the ledgers, and then also the tax software that we're using, so that you can be sure that whichever provider you're choosing for MTD, they are compatible from end to end. And then step 4, just move through the slides. Fabulous, thank you. So this is when we move on to what is probably the most important part, which is actually processing of the quarterly updates to HMRC. So this is the point that you're sharing information with HMRC via what we call it as like a light income and expense report. So there's no declaration at the monthly quarterly updates. Now, we've ensured at Sage that our MTD tools are really intuitive, and this is an opportunity to provide you with lots of key information so that you can use these checkpoints to have valuable conversations with your clients. So, for example, in our dashboards, they give you a total amount of days until the final tax return is due, so that you can use that to then map out your workload. And something that I'm really excited about is that it gives you a live tax estimate. So this removes that kind of awkward conversation that you end up having with the clients probably on deadline day, where you tell them how much tax they've got to pay. What it now means is that we can start entering into that more tax planning and that advisory piece, because throughout the year we can start having conversations about tax planning rather than being like a compliance conveyor belt, really. I quite like that actually, compliance conveyor belt, so I'll keep hold of that one. So yeah, so that's sort of the plan really with what happens at this point. And then step 5, this is when we move into that year-end piece. So this is where it's going to be quite familiar. You've kind of done all these parts before. So this is where we start adding in the accruals and the prepayments, inventory adjustments, capital allowances, bad debt relief, and sort of all the other fine tuning that comes with this stage. The difference being is that those adjustments are only made at year end. So they're not made on a quarterly basis. So that ensures that the quarterly updates that we just saw through step 4, they're a real light touch. But then when we get to the year end, that's when we get the accuracy. Then we've got step 6. So again, this process will feel more familiar for you. So we still produce the year-end accounts where required, so the P&L balance sheet, capital allowances schedule. The only difference is how that information has been fed into us. So rather than waiting for that shoebox in January, you've already had 4 quarterly updates throughout the year. So what that then means is when we get into year end, that process is far cleaner and faster. And in most cases, that's going to be easier to manage. So once you've then done your year-end adjustments, that's when you can start to bring in the other income sources. So your PAYE, your bank interest, dividends, rental income, etc. So the whole workflow is quarterly updates for self-employment and property, plus other income sources at year end. And then we reach the final stage, that's the MTD tax return. So this replaces the self-assessment as we know it currently. And what this does is it pulls together the quarterly updates, the year-end adjustments, and any other income into a complete submission. So key thing here to understand is that this isn't just a self-assessment in a new format. Every software provider has had to build a brand new tax return engine. So with that, it means don't assume that the current self-assessment software that you're using will automatically work for MTD. And that's why we made a point earlier on about speaking with your provider so that you can find out what the MTD tax return actually looks like in their software. And it's going to be really key for you to actually go in and test that way before you're actually going to need to use the software, so that you can be confident in knowing that whatever solution you're choosing is the right fit for your clients. Now, at Sage, we're building that natively into the ledger, and we are also offering it as a standalone tool. So I think at this point is when I hand back over to you, Jack, but I'm hoping for the
Fantastic.
Next. Fabulous.
Great. So there's a few people who have mentioned not being able to see the slides there. So I do think if anyone is having those issues still, if you jump back out, jump back in, you should be able to see that. From what I can see, there's a 99% audience view. So there's 1% of you who still can't see those slides. So if you are having those challenges, if you jump back out and jump back in, that should hopefully solve it for you within there. Great. Okay. So what I want to talk about here and the approach that we're going to take is a little bit about how we can engage with our clients in this process. A big part of what we're going to be doing here is just to think about how it is that we can ensure that we're speaking to our clients in the right possible way. So I want to talk about the 1-3-12 method. So this is talking about how we're going to review this process with our clients, from data capture every month to quarterly updates and services every 3 months. And then you've got 12 months for everything else, an overarching review of what it is that we're going to be doing for them. So this is important because a big part of this change and delivering this change is going to come from how we communicate with our clients. Now, that's ironic with the way we started this webinar in terms of communication, but it's really important for you guys to be able to deliver this in the best possible way. So if you don't charge for this work and you don't charge for this change, then that makes it harder for you to be able to deliver this service in the best possible way. And it's really hard to train that client in the best possible approach. So make sure you listen to that voice in your head, as you say here, in terms of how long is it going to take to do these things. I'm already busy. How am I going to approach this? How am I supposed to make sure I know that this client understands what's going on? All of these questions are questions that we want to be able to answer now, but it's really important to listen to those and address those questions moving forward. So when we think about making this work, there's a journey that we want to take the clients on. So we want to go from defining those benefits right through to automating our systems and setting those reminders to have those conversations with our clients. Now, throughout that, there's the other steps we need to consider. So are we engaging our team when we're thinking about this? Are they aware of these changes? Are they going to be on the forefront of this, being ambassadors for this change as well? Think about how we're going to communicate this. So there's different approaches we can take there. Are we going to have it worked into a standard communication that we already have with a client? Or are we going to build out our own email campaign or our own one-to-many webinar, for example? Like, it's up to you guys to think about how this is going to happen, but having a plan around that communication is going to be really important. We want to make sure that we price consistently, and I'll give a quick overview of a way we can consider that and the things that we might want to think about in that process. Think about how we can make that pricing clear and transparent, and then engaging these people through a process that's going to make sure they understand exactly what they're paying for, exactly why their fee might change, and exactly when we're going to speak to them about that. So if we want to make sure that we're addressing these with our client effectively, we want to make sure that we can segment our clients effectively as well. So if we're thinking about our communication style, we need to think about who we're going to be communicating with. So the first thing to consider within this before we think about that is to build our target timeline for who we're going to be talking to. So if we've got 30 weeks to a deadline, for example, there's 90 clients impacted, then we know that we're going to have 3 conversations a week. So there's about 30 weeks until the April start of this. That's why I put 30 in there, but that's just an arbitrary deadline that I've set for the sake of the example. You guys might want to think about the fact that you want to have everything done before Christmas. So you've got, let's say, 20 weeks until that hits. So you've got a shorter time frame and more conversations to have every single week. So segmenting clients and building that into this plan is going to be really important when we think about what's the workload going to look like, how many people do I need to speak to, and when do I need to start having these conversations. So to approach this in a really effective way, if we think about the idea of segmenting our service offering, building our pricing approach, and then being ready for those client conversations, there's 3 things within here that we know we need to do across that timeline. So it's really important to make sure that we can deliver those things. Now, there's probably 3 segments that we want to consider when we're segmenting our clients. Obviously, the first one is who's actually going to be affected in April 2026. There may be other segments you want to think about in terms of difficult clients versus easy clients, software laggards versus software leaders, things like that to do within there. But I think when we're thinking about what we actually have to do, these 3 segments are really useful for us. So we might have a group of clients that want to service themselves throughout the year, and we're just submitting that final tax return. So I'm going to call that the do it with me segment. We might have an in-between group where they're delivered on day-to-day work, but we're going to review ahead of each submission and also manage that final tax return within there as well. And then you might have a group where you just own the end-to-end process. So this is a really effective way to think about this, because this is ultimately about defining that communication strategy. Where I think people might fall down and struggle with this is when things fall between the gaps in terms of those responsibilities. So these segments work really well because they're leading with the responsibility. You've got these 3 options. You can present that to your clients, but in this process, we're going to make it really clear what they're responsible for and what we're responsible for. Scope creep and the challenges we have around that often just comes from this ability to really clearly communicate and really make sure we define those rules around what we're going to be doing and what we're not going to be doing, what they're paying for and what they're not paying for. So a classic grey area there is when we receive a phone call and we offer out 3 or 4 hours tax advice, for example, and they don't pay for it. They just rang us and when we give that away for free. That's a grey area and an undefined service that we haven't made it really clear in terms of the outcome and the fact they should be paying for it. And when we're thinking about this group of people moving into quarterly work, that's just going to expose us to more of those types of scenarios. So we want to make sure that we're really on top of that. So The other segment that we want to think about in this, especially with the timeline for the first tranche of people that are going to be affected, is digitizing their records are already digitized, because there's a good chance that that first segment is going to need quite a bit more work than that second segment, because we're going to have to digitize them. So there's also a decent chance that the people that fall into that first bucket of undigitized records might be the ones that are a little bit resistant to change. I'm not saying they're all going to be like that, but if we think about the journey of communication we've got to take them on, if they're the sort of people that are very resistant to any sort of change, they just want to do the same that they've always done for years, then that's a longer time frame to get them to adapt that change, compared to people that are already digitized, that are ready to go and really open to doing things differently. So when we're thinking about this, attitude is really important, as well as just the practical state that they're in at this point. So when we're preparing for that April deadline, I don't think there's any issue with taking a bit of a gut feel into that segmentation as well, like how you feel about how they'll handle this conversation. You guys are really close to your clients, you understand them really well, and you can probably make a really good shout about how they're going to feel about it from your interactions with them. So there shouldn't shy away from building that into our timeframes as well. Now, when we're thinking about our pricing foundations within here and how we're going to build this out, I think there's 5 things to consider. So we are changing the way we deliver our service, and we are taking someone who had, end of year single interaction to a more regular approach within here. So I think these 5 foundations are really important to make sure we revisit what we do within there, because there's a good chance we're going to have to go back to the drawing board to think about what these pricings and what these services are. So the first one is transparency. Now that's really important, because you need to consider what they need to know to appreciate a price change. So what I mean by that is if you price by the hour, let's say, and you know that if going from 100 transactions to process a month to 500 transactions a month is going to change how many hours you have to put in, it's hard to explain that to the client when we're talking about an hourly rate. If we start the relationship or the reset of the relationship, as we might be doing with MTD, with, okay, how many transactions will we be managing? Great, it's 100 a month, fantastic, this is your price for that. We've already established that rule. They understand the rules of what they're going to be charged for because of that transparency. Add that layer to the internal team. If they're the person delivering the day-to-day work, they know that additional people on payroll or more transactions or a change in revenue changes their work and the amount of hours they need to put in, then they also can monitor that for you with the clients as well. So they can be the front line of checking and monitoring that scope change to make sure you're not letting profitability fall off the table. Consistency is really important, because I think of what I mentioned around those attitudinal approaches with clients. Consistency often gets undermined by a fear of clients, difficult clients that we say, well, there's no way they'd accept this, so I'm not going to do it for them. That introduces inconsistency into this process. And we need to make sure that everybody's on the same approach, so we can deliver this automatically, we can systemize it, we can make sure we're profitable. I think MTD could be a bit of a trap for people falling into. Difficult clients get treated differently because they act in a certain way, which is going to cause us problems moving forward. The third one is to lead by that value output. So thinking about focusing on that value, the outcome, what it is we're going to be doing, rather than just the time we're putting in. And this is a difficult one for many people because of this enforced change. There's no value in it. We've been told to do it, that sort of attitude. But if you looked into the idea of avoiding penalties, like Paige spoke about having to not worry about this within your business, be able to focus on what matters for your business, that's all value you guys offer every single day. So just repositioning our services around those things can really help. Make sure it's systemized so everybody in the business can deliver it. We don't want to create bottlenecks. And the reason we don't want to do that is because as the volume increases, as more people fall into that MTD threshold, if there's only one person in your business that can have that conversation, that's assuming you've got more people in your team, then that's going to be difficult if you're the only person that can have that conversation. And 4 and 5 are peas in a pod, really, because if you are the only person in the business, you still want an efficient, systemized approach to your pricing, because you don't want to have a load of work taken away by having a pricing conversation, understanding what the fee should be, and sending that to the client. That's really important because we need the barrier to be as low as possible for this. Because if you're someone who doesn't like pricing conversations, if you feel awkward about this, if you're concerned about how clients will tackle it, then you'll probably look for an excuse not to do it. If it's inefficient and not systemized, that's a great excuse not to do this. And then moving forward, our profitability is undermined. So I want to give just an example of what this might look like when we're preparing for MTD. So I am not saying this is exactly how you should do it. I just want to show you a little bit of a coverage of the services that we might create to break down and deliver to those different segments. So 1 to 7 within here, I've got entry into MTD, setup and training. Think about my undigitized clients. I need to make sure that there's a service that I can offer to make that as easy as possible, to make it simple for them, but also not lose out on the money that I should earn from that. And then we just move through the process of delivering that from quarterly updates through to data processing, bank rec, bookkeeping, the tax return itself. And then number 7 is this added value piece. What can we do with all this additional information? Can we start thinking about a tax planning service that goes above and beyond, because we've now got an opportunity with all this real-time data to start offering more insight into how they're performing, how we can save them tax, what they should do moving forward. So there is an opportunity within there that I want to put in there, and I've highlighted that as gold because that's probably something we don't typically offer to these clients currently, and is an opportunity to do so moving forward. Now, once we've got that, I do have, just for you guys to be aware, a presentation that breaks down those services in more of a what sort of questions we should ask, what's the value in there. There's not the time to go into it on this presentation, but if you're interested in that, I can provide that as well. But just thinking about those services and how we then deliver that across these segments, you can see how we might have varying services across those 3 segments. So now I can easily filter those people through those 3 segments by thinking about how much we're going to be involved. As they take more responsibility, the service and the fee goes down. As we take more responsibility, the opposite happens. It's quite nice and simple in that sense. And the other benefit of this, when we're preparing for MTD, when we're getting ready to deliver this, is that we're thinking about who we actually want to work with. You might be sat here thinking, oh, I don't want to do it with me. I don't want to just set them up, let them do all the work, and then I'd be left with everything they've done at the end of the year. That sounds like a nightmare. That's fine, but you just don't offer that segment and you don't do that work. And the people that may fall into that bracket in terms of that's what they want may not be a good fit client for you. So the other part of this exercise in getting ready for this is to think about who's going to be a good fit client for you. What sort of work excites you, do you want to do, and what don't you want to do? So it's a really great way to reassess how you can create value for yourself in the business as well in terms of the work that you're going to be doing. Then just some tips around how we can be ready for this conversation. So if we think about breaking down a pricing conversation, I think there's a few key things we should consider. So we've mentioned it, but introduce MTD early. If you haven't, the clients are aware of it already, think about how you're going to do that. Think about setting those intentions. Those intentions will tie directly into that value proposition. So do you want them to stop worrying? Are we helping them plan for what's coming? Do we want them to focus on what matters to them? That intention will allow us to position ourselves around that value piece within there. Think about the billing question and how we're going to tackle that. How are we going to frame up our new structure? Think about communication, how step 1 here is so important for this one. If they know what's coming, then this becomes much easier for us. Prepare for objections is another one. This is really important because this is the one that will stop you having these conversations, and we will face them. People will say, well, I'll do it myself, or why my fee's gone up, I'm not paying that. Just be ready for that, because we don't want to go straight to offering them a discount or bending to their will straight away, because that's going to cause us problems as well. And just have that set agenda, systemize this approach. If you've got 3 conversations a week to have to be ready for the deadline, make it easy for yourself. Now, The other thing to think about here is there's going to be a pressure point in this journey. So there is a pressure point around this point moving forward, because we do have annual payment here, most likely for 25, 26, and then 26, 27, we're going to have to get them onto most probably a monthly billing cycle. So it's going to feel like they're paying twice. So just think about how you're going to tackle that conversation. And that's why communication is really important, because we want to make sure that this is as seamless as possible. So you want to think about where those pressure points might come from. So if we say, here's your 500 quid bill, oh, and next month you're going on to a 80 quid a month direct debit, how are we going to position that? How do we want to make that as easy as possible for them when we deliver that approach? Fantastic. Okay, so I'm just going to hand this back to Paige now, just in that view. So we'll come to the questions as we go through, but please, guys, keep posting those in there. It's great to see. And Paige, if you want to come back in and take over there, you are on mute, so you just need to unmute yourself there.
And you'll hear me. Perfect. Right. Okay. We're on a roll. Yeah, so I'll just to go back to what Jack was mentioning there, I've seen loads of questions that came through, unfortunately, as I did jump out. So I'll address those in a second, because although you guys can't see each other's questions, they're actually all quite similar. So there's a couple of topics that I'll cover off just once we finish off these next few slides. But yeah, I just want to sort of wrap up really the session by highlighting what we've spoken about today, and then just some things for you guys to mention as we go forward really. So the first thing to think about is education. So just on the next slide, sorry, Jack. MTD is super complex, and seeing your questions as well come through, I think we've got over 200 of you on here, so you're all asking really, really similar questions, and it is because this MTD is so complex. There's loads of moving parts to it, and it's all about the details, which is why it's really important to engage with your software providers and really understand the detail around MTD. I'm really proud of what Sage has to offer, not only in terms of intuitive products for different types of clients, but also around our MTD Support Hub, where there is a catalogue of useful guides and templates, plans, and on-demand content. We're not here just to show you how to sort of click through buttons in software. We're really here to help you with those tough conversations and how to structure a new workflow and where the opportunities for profit are, and kind of everything else really that comes into this. So if it's not directly with either me or Jack, then we do really emphasize that you reach out to your local Sage managers for more support. They're going to be the ones that are going to be able to help you identify what tools are right for what clients, and specifically whether you need to have different softwares for the clients and kind of how to have that conversation with them. So although it is a really complex matter, we are here to support you in various different forms. And then the next thing to bear in mind is that client segmentation that we discussed earlier on. So like I said, it isn't a pretty task, and it is a bit of an admin thing to be working through, but what we can't be doing is assuming that all the clients require the same kind of communication, as Jack's gone through with us already today, that we can't be assuming that they all require the same amount of pricing. So in the same respect of that, we can't also assume that they need all the same tools as well. So it's really about segmenting that client base so that we can start tailoring the approach to those different types of clients. And then that kind of takes me into the next step really, because following on from that segmentation, once we've got all of that information in front of us, that's when we're going to be able to build out that build out that plan. So if you have a team, then you're going to be in a position where you can divide and conquer on how we want to tackle those conversations. But ultimately, the deadline is coming, and we're all coming at it at the same time. So planning is going to be really essential here. And then the next bit is communication. So this bit is going to be really important, because your clients are trusting you as their agents to take care of compliance as an absolute minimum. So what we don't want to have is the first time that they hear about these regulation changes for it to come from the HMRC, because we know how they address their letters. We've got an opportunity now to reach out to the clients first and educate them, and then we've got an opportunity to really adapt the way that we deliver that information so that they feel reassured that they're paying you guys to help them with that plan. So then that also follows on to the conversation that we've just recently had about speaking to the providers on what tools that they can provide. So we covered this off slightly just earlier on about how if you speak to your providers, then you'll be able to have an opportunity to see what those updates look like. That's going to be really key for you to be really confident in choosing what solution is going to be right for your clients. And then again, it's going to be about testing them as early doors as possible. Then the next part is obviously reviewing, repricing and re-engaging. So Jack's walked us through that today, and it's really key bits of advice that I'm hoping you guys have found valuable in that. So I don't want you guys to feel like you're alone with this, and kind of as Jack mentioned, there are elements of this that we would need to break down into further conversations that we've not had the time to do on today's webinar, but we have got all the resources out there that we can direct you to and we can support you with either in person or obviously digitally as well. So we've got the catalogue of resources there. So please reach out to us for any support, any further support on this anyway. And then that takes me on to the next thing, which a lot of you guys have been asking questions about, and I think that's obviously followed on from the poll that we've had earlier on in today's session. Now, we are going to struggle to nail down pricing, processing and the communications if you don't actually have anybody signed up onto that process. Now, we've tailored our approach to that on our end as well, so our products are fit for you to onboard your clients onto the MTD public beta, but we're all coming at it at the same time. So there isn't going to be a blueprint on what to do, and there's no experts that we can learn from. So my advice is going to be kind to yourselves and test it out now so that you are familiar with that. I'm by no means suggesting that you should go and stick all your clients through this, but a piece of advice that I always give my clients, any sort of accountant really, with onboarding clients through the beta, is to choose clients that you already have really good relationships with. The ones that are perhaps more forgiving and maybe they're a little bit more tech savvy as well. Have a conversation with them where you're being really open and explaining that you're still figuring it out yourself, because it is a huge regulation change that every single accountant and bookkeeper is going through at the same time. Maybe you could even incentivize them so that they can be on board with you and maybe some kind of discounted pricing throughout the interim. But what that enables you to do is have the opportunity to test the products, test the updates through the HMRC, whilst not feeling like you need to have everything fine-tuned right now, so your clients can be a bit more forgiving throughout that process. I know that if I owned a business myself, I would rather feel confident knowing that my accountant is choosing to be an early adopter so that they're ready for when this came around, rather than sort of reading a letter that lands on my desk from the HMRC and not have heard from my accountant yet. So just a really key bit of information about onboarding and sort of choosing clients that we can onboard onto that beta as early as possible. And then finally, or for myself anyway, once you have chosen those clients to go onto the beta, you can now begin to systemize that process. So this isn't just a change in digital bookkeeping. We're going to be changing our entire workflow of the team. So it sounds a bit harsh, but you can either choose to leave it last minute or you can choose to start the work now. It's going to be the same piece of information, same amount of work to do. So it's one of those questions to ask yourself as to what the cost is of doing nothing versus what the cost is in actually starting. So on that point, I'm going to pass back over to Jack just to sort of wrap up, really.
Thank you, Paige. Yeah, so there is one other thing that I just want to show you guys and talk about with this, because we are really committed, as we said at the start, to supporting you in the best possible way. So I want to talk about how Sage Copilot is going to help get this work done faster, make smarter decisions, and help you guys get ahead. So put the proof in the pudding and show you what this looks like. Essentially, we're building out a Making Tax Digital Making Tax Digital for income tax agent, apologies there. So this is going to be using Sage Copilot to really help create and automate those tasks, whether it's agnostic tasks for the practice or specific tasks for the client. So you can see in here, Sage Copilot generating those tasks for me. Within here, I can see some examples of the tasks that have been created by Copilot. So identify sole trader businesses, add existing client authorizations, so I can manage that directly in my task list. And then in here, we can see that we can assign those tasks to the specific clients that are affected. So we can make sure that people where they are eligible and their criteria match this, we can assign that using AI through Sage Copilot. So this is something just to show that we're really committed to make sure that our authentic intelligence that we're using is driving efficiencies for you guys so you can add more value to your clients and be those central hubs to the businesses in your communities, as we mentioned. So the final thing that I just want to say is, again, just to reiterate that chance to join the beta. It's an amazing starting point for delivering this within here. And just with the final thing within that, I just want to understand how confident you are feeling about adding a client to the beta as well within there. So I'm just going to ask this poll quickly while we pull up the questions within there and go through any questions moving forward. So are there any questions that you see in their page that you would like to address while the guys are filling in the poll?
Yeah, there was quite a few questions actually around the beta. So what I've done is I've just stuck a link into the chat, which I hope has gone out to everybody. So then that'll take you through to the page that will allow you to join up to the beta. So hopefully that answers quite a lot of the questions around that. But something else that was also mentioned, which I believe must have come about just as I jumped off, was a few questions around, more specifically, landlords. So one of the points in the earlier slides is that UK property income gets its own update, and that is separate from any self-employed. So we would need to treat self-employment income and rental income separately, but ultimately the UK property gets bolted together. So if the property is jointly owned, then the gross figures are submitted once, not split per owner. We had sort of maybe half a dozen questions actually just around that topic. So hopefully that answers that one. And then there was another question around foreign property as well. So foreign property income is included in the same way. So I'm hoping that answers some of those questions, but I'm no doubt that there's going to be so many more follow-on questions from this as well. So we feel free to reach out to us after this. And then there was another few questions around the actual quarterly updates themselves. So they are going to be cumulative, i.e. if you make an update in Q2, then that does roll forward into Q3. So they're not mini tax returns. They don't need accruals and prepayments and stock adjustments. We like to refer to it more as a digital handshake with the HMRC, and kind of evidence really that the records are being kept digitally. So there was another question that was quite similar around what the deadlines are. So those deadlines are fixed. So it's 7th of August, 7th of November, 7th of Feb, 7th of May. And also a quick note as well is that HMRC are going to assume that all your clients have the 5th of April year end unless you tell them otherwise. So worth just making a note at that point as well if your client is a 31st of March year end, so that you can make them aware of that within the first quarter. That's a summary of probably about 12 or so questions that I saw in the chat, but I don't know, Jack, if you've seen anything more specific to your content.
Yes, so there's a few things in there. Firstly, Laura, you've mentioned about receiving those more detailed slides that I mentioned during my service run through. I can share that absolutely. And then there's a few other questions around, not so much questions, but more points around someone earning 51K doesn't care about tax planning. And that's, completely valid. Those services, as I said, need to be tailored towards what your clients want to be able to deliver. I have spoken to accountants that are going to offer services like that because they think it's right for their client base, but it needs to be right for you. So I am not saying those 7 services are the be all and end all gospel. They're an example of how you break those down to make sure you're profitable with your clients, just to clarify that within there. There's a few other questions around what's going to be available from Sage and when. So due to some technical difficulties we have gone over time here, so just so you're aware, people will be reaching out to you guys so we can make sure that you get those answers in more detail, because we've run out of time here, and we will have a copy of those questions. So I'll make sure I go through and ensure that more detailed responses that are required are shared with you guys as well. So apologies about that. Fantastic. Okay, so is there any final points from yourself, Paige?
No final points, but just like I said, I know there's loads of questions coming in, so I do want to make sure that these are all answered for you guys. So we will reach out afterwards yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you very much, guys. Appreciate you joining us on what I imagine is your lunch hour. Really hope that was useful. If you want to reach out to either of us on LinkedIn and speak to us directly, we're both very open to that, so please feel free to do that. And as I say, those unanswered questions or those ones that weren't answered in detail, we'll make sure we go through those just because we didn't have the time slot we thought we would to address those questions. So thank you very much. Please reach out and have a fantastic rest of the day.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.